Welcome to episode 78 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, or I'm an actor portraying myself and confusing you.
And I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast, and
also played by an actor who sounds just like James Sabata. Joining us today, this is horror's very own Bob Pastorella. Bob, thank you for being here today, man.
Thank you for having me. This has been checking out your episodes, and this is going to be a lot of fun.
So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and the podcast and your new book and all of that good stuff?
All right. Well, I'm the co-host of the podcast This is Horror with Michael David Wilson, and we're getting close to 400 episodes. I want to say we're at like 370, something like that. Haven't checked. We've interviewed all kinds of interesting guests, Joe Lansdale, Josh Mallerman, Chuck Palnick, Gemma Files, Kathy Koja. So, the list goes on and on. We do, well-established writers, and of course, new voices, and just trying to, basically do a deep dive conversation and get to know the writer, behind the stories. Me and Michael recently collaborated on a novel that came out on Halloween called They're Watching. And it is basically, They're Watching is The Wicker Man meets Body Double with a splash of Suspiria.
Nice.
So, yeah, it is, it's an occult thriller. And that's probably giving away a little bit too much. And then again, it's probably not giving away anything at all. So, yeah, we definitely. Well,
I mean, we already know somebody's watching, so.
That's right. Don't trust anyone. They're watching.
Especially Don. Don't trust Don.
oh, Jesus.
It's always the one who says, don't trust that guy that you can't trust. So really, we know what's going on here. So I want to start. One of my favorite things about your podcast is, I'm going to say most, maybe it's all, but I'm going to say most because I'm not sure. Most of your episodes are like two-parters, and you really get to know authors, and then you kind of do some other stuff with the second half. And I think that's such a cool way to do things. I got introduced to it because my buddy Danger Slater was on the show, and so I checked out his episodes, and then I just got kind of hooked. And now if I'm stuck and I can't write and I'm getting that anxiety-filled craziness, I throw on your show because every author on there has offered something to help you with writing. And maybe that doesn't help the general audience, but anybody like me, holy shit, that's so powerful. And the other thing that I've taken from the episodes I've listened to is it really reminds me that even the Josh Mallermans of the world get stuck occasionally, or, just we all have that same, at some point you're staring at a blank screen again and you go, do I remember how to do this? And it's just been a really cool thing to take from your show. So thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate it. And I appreciate it a lot. It's what we try to do is, we definitely put the guest front and center, but we do our best to make the guests feel comfortable to where we can find out not only, little tricks and tips, of the writing life and of being a creative, but also how that affects them personally. And you're right. I mean, we've talked to many people who have got multiple books out, and they all suffer, from the same things that any writer would suffer from. They get stuck. They feel, imposter syndrome. They might have some mental or emotional issues that they're trying to work through that's affected them. And it's just one of those things that we definitely try to get into the human behind the writer, and I think that's important. And yeah, I do like the dual format. It almost, you're like the first person who's ever said it that way, but it is kind of like, each episode, for the most part, they're two-parters. So yeah, there is like this, really kind of personal stuff usually at the very beginning, and then the second part of it is more of kind of getting into the stories and things like that. So it's you get a well-rounded look at the writers, and I think that's important.
Well, and it's a cool concept because of the way it's set up, because like you said, you do get into the personal. So then when you get to the stories, you feel more like, oh, wow, I wonder if this thing he talked about earlier played into this. And I'm one of those people that just overanalyzes everyone, especially myself. So I sit there and I'm like, I wonder if he even knows that he had this thing happen. And then, I just get lost in that shit. So it's just great to me. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, so you said 400 episodes almost. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. How did you guys start? Like, what made you start the podcast?
Well, Michael started it years ago, and he's had other co-hosts. There's let's see, John Costello, I believe, was the first one, and then with him and Dan Howarth. And I got started with them. Basically, Michael reached out to me because I wrote a story that he enjoyed, a story from the booked anthology that they did several years ago, and a story called "Take My Breath Away." And he liked that story and reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to do some reviews and things like that, and if I wanted to be a guest on the podcast. And I was like, shoot, yeah, I'll be a guest on the podcast. That sounded like a lot of fun. And so, I got on to the podcast. And, the crazy thing is that before he even asked me if I wanted to be a guest on the podcast, I was previously a guest on the book podcast because of the Warmed and Bound interviews that they did from the Warmed and Bound anthology. And before that, I think I kind of knew what a podcast was, but I didn't realize, how big the podcast market, the podcast culture is. I had no clue. And, and so once I started like really searching, into it, I was like, man, it's just like, it's a whole other world out there, and it's like, there's like literally podcasts about everything and anything. And I think that's so cool. And I mean, and it has to be doing good because, I mean, there wouldn't be so many podcasts if people didn't listen. And, to be involved with that now, I'm just like, it's still kind of, it blows me away. It's like, it's one of those things I always say that, if you would have told me, 6 years ago or 5 years ago that, hey, you're going to actually be able to have a conversation, with Kathy Koja, who's one of my all-time favorite authors ever, nice. I would call you a fucking liar. I'd say you there's no way that you'll ever talk to me. I'm nobody. But we had her on the show, and we've had her on the show a couple of times for different things. And she's so approachable. She's, so nice and so knowledgeable and so generous with her time that it's just, it was really hard for me not to, to fanboy, and to maintain, composure. But, it's just, to me, it's just unbelievable. Me and Michael, we get as much out of talking to the guests as anyone else does. And, because we're both creatives as well. And I think that's, that to me, it's like, it's like the coolest thing ever. Let's just say that. But, it's I just find it fascinating that we have this type of medium and it's still going strong and it has no end in sight. And that's the coolest thing about it.
I mean, that's kind of how I feel about our show. How about you, Don?
Most definitely.
We've talked to people that I never expected to be able to talk to, and then I look at my dream list and I'm like, holy shit, I actually knocked some of these people off already. They're dead. I knocked them off.
Well, we still haven't gotten Tandy Newton, so my list is still around.
Well, I still have Joe Hill on mine, so. But yeah, it's so interesting how podcasting allows a lot of those barriers out of the way. Like you don't have to meet anywhere. You don't have to dress up. You don't have to look nice. You don't have to travel.
Right.
There's just none of that stuff. And especially with COVID going on, I feel like podcasts really kind of allowed everyone, not just us, but like listeners as well, to just kind of have that connection still and that ability to like when I go to a con, like I have certain things I want to do and I have these groups of people I hang out with because I get a certain energy from that. And podcasts have been the way that I get that energy now. And I feel like that has to translate to other people in various ways as well. Yeah,
unless you escape. I mean, the great thing about the conventions and conferences that we had, I mean, I don't know when they'll ever be back, because wearing a mask and social distancing and washing hands is, I guess, too complicated for us. But it allows us to have that escape that we had at those conventions and conferences where we got to, mingle with people that were in our, within our field or within our genre, and then create circles with those people to where, you could have a chat or you could shoot emails back and forth or text or Facebook or whatever. And you have you have that renewed connection through the podcast themselves to where, whether you're listening to it or you're on one hosting, whatever, it still gives you that moment to be creative and to also listen to other people who are creative.
Oh, yeah. I agree. It's I quit going to cons for a long time. And then I just started back a couple years ago. And now, of course, we can't go. But I'm not real big on traveling. Like I've never flown in a plane. So and I'm sure one day I'll have to. But I'm 53 now and I haven't done it yet. But if it's something in Texas, where I live, and I'll drive it. So I started going to KillerCon, and there's something, I don't know, it's that community feel to it, and that's a very small. They keep it small on purpose. Con, I mean, it's like max 250, 250.
Nice.
People. So, and I don't even think we get. I think we get close to that, but it's not, pretty much anybody who would want to go can go, right? Mm-hmm. So, and my first one there. It was amazing that we had Joe Lansdale there, and I'd met Joe a couple of times before that. The local bookstore had him in a couple of times for readings, and we had a film festival, and he was one of the guests of honor there, so I got a chance to meet him and talk with him, and I remember we were going to KillerCon, and it was like after the events and everything that they had. And people were meeting in the bar, and I went to my room for something. And I walked back down to the lobby to go down to the bar, and Lansdale's sitting in the lobby, and there's like 20 people sitting around him. And Lansdale's talking, and he's a talker, and he's a storyteller. He's a natural born storyteller. And I'm like, hold on a second. There's people that I don't even know out over here. They're listening. So I went and got my friends, and they're all trying to drink and everything. And I'm like, hey. Lansdale's holding court out in the lobby. If you'd like to learn something, follow me.
And they were like, get a Budweiser any day.
Right. Yeah, and they were like, you mean he's talking? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, shit, what are we standing out here for? So we go out there, and he talks for about another hour or so. And just, and he's just chewing the fat with one of his other friends. But we're all listening to his stories, and that kind of, I don't know. And here's the thing. When we all got kind of involved in the conversation, we could, ask questions, things like that. He would interject from that. And it's like he was teaching a class, just kind of impromptu. about the history of certain things and writing and how you did it, and how they did it back then. And it was fast. You can't pay for that shit,
Nope.
But I mean, we did because we paid, for the con, but that wasn't really part of it. And, I miss that. And doing it, thank God we can do it virtually, on the internet, and thank God for podcasts and recordings and readings and things, because I would have gone crazy this year, considering that we really couldn't do anything. So I'm very, very grateful that we have this technology that allows us to get together. But man, I hope that we can get through all this crap so we can actually get together and shake each other's hands and give hugs and all that again.
Definitely. Now we have a little con kind of like that. I think the max is 300 or 350, and it's a TusCon. It's in Tucson, Arizona, and it's a sci-fi horror con. And Jonathan Mayberry was one of the top guests last year. And same thing, like we had lunch with him, and we had like a table of maybe 10 authors, and he's telling stories, and we're all trading jokes, and like you can't buy that experience. Like I know you talked about the admission price, but that's not included. You have to put yourself in those positions as well. But it's that energy is priceless. Like I left that con. And I did 13 cons last year, right? That's the con that I left going, I can absolutely do this, because every person I talk to here is doing it, and every person here believes that we can all do it. And they were so supportive and so great. And I think that sense of community, to bring this back to what we were talking about with podcasts, there's a difference between reading comments online if we were all in a horror forum, right? And feeling the energy of people talking about what they love. And I think that's what podcasts give us and cons give us. And we wouldn't do the podcast without listeners. So while they are behind the times because this isn't live or whatever you want to call it, like they bring that energy as well, because without that, we wouldn't be doing this at all. So I just love how podcasts are allowing us to continue the community building and just giving people something to do during this shit, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
With all of that said, I suppose they want us to talk about this film, huh?
Yeah.
So you chose Body Double. Why don't you give us a breakdown? Obviously, it plays into your new book, but what else do you love about Body Double?
Well, Body Double, Brian De Palma is one of my favorite directors. He's directed quite a few films that I really, really enjoy. And I think part of it is that Brian likes to tackle controversial subjects, and he gives no fucks doing so. So, when Body Double came out, it was considered controversial. I think today we'd call it problematic. It is not a film that could be done scene for scene, take for take today.
No. I don't think you could even use the line, "I'm the guy that almost fucked you on the beach."
Yeah, you probably, you may be able to get with that line, but I don't know, man. I've seen some
people just be like, "What?"
You may be able to get by with that line. I don't know.
Probably.
I don't know. If you can have movies like Bad Santa, then certainly you could probably do that too. But
go ahead.
I was going to say he has this obsession with voyeurism. I mean, look at you get a sense of that from Dressed to Kill, definitely from Blowout. And this one here is definitely, his kind of homage to Alfred Hitchcock, but the first time I saw it, of course, and we were kind of talking this before we started recording, but it was one of those, I seen it when I was, probably a senior in high school, or maybe I was fresh out of high school. And it was one of those movies that was a TNA film, and it's like it's like we talked about in your friends, like, man, it's kind of like about the porno industry, and you're like going, well, is it a porno? But it's, once you watch it, you realize, okay, it's not really about that. But then again, as you get older, you realize it is completely about that, but looking at it from a cracked lens. Also, another really cool thing about it had Craig Wasson, and Craig was in the kind of, I guess, the adaptation of Peter Straub's Ghost Story, and he played Don Wanderley, and I don't know. It was like seeing Craig in these two movies. I was like, man, he's going to be like a really, really big actor, And I don't know what happened to Craig. I don't know. I think he's still doing some things, but it didn't turn out to be the big actor that I thought he was going to be, which is sad because he's actually pretty good, But it was one of those movies that I watched it for one reason and liked it for another. As I've gotten older, it's become one of my favorite movies. It's definitely a comfort film. I can put it in and watch it, and just there's so many different scenes and things that I remember that are just, to me, they're just kind of funny, kind of suspenseful, kind of, golly, you couldn't realize that was really who it was, but the whole time, one of those things. And so, you get to see Melanie Griffith when she's like very young, and I think she'd only done just a few films by then, and the history behind why he picked her over his original choice is really kind of interesting. But you can tell that she's, at that point in time, she's actually got some chops, and she plays that character a little differently than what you would typically play. She kind of gives that character a little bit of agency, which I think is pretty cool.
Well, even her ability to transition of letting the guard down for the character, like when he says your smile, her reaction is so genuine, like she's legitimately caught off guard, and I don't know, like it felt like that particular moment was such good acting, because you're really playing like three people in that moment. And I thought that was such a cool little, because it's like totally guarded and like laying down what I will and won't do, and then you get caught off guard and you do the smile thing, and then you have to come back and put your guard up, but now it's different. So it really felt to me like three different characters in this span of like a minute. And I don't know, that was like what really hit me in this film from her, was just like, is that how people found out she could act? Was something like that? Like, not that she couldn't act or whatever, but like, you were saying this is one of her first films. Like, is that what made people take notice? And I don't know, but I thought that was a really cool moment as far as acting goes. Going back. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say that he saw a kind of like a vulnerability in her screen test. His original choice for the role was adult film star Annette Haven.
Yes.
And who can actually act. It's like you think, okay, an adult film star, can they actually act? Well, she actually could. And he was really interested in having her do it. And she is in the movie. She just doesn't play Holly Body. But during the screen, during the testing and everything, he saw a vulnerability in Melanie that Annette, he would have had to work with her a little bit more to get at. And he was like, no, this girl's got it already. So this is going to be my choice. And then he completely changed his mind over why he wanted Annette in the first place. So, and it's Brian De Palma. He probably changed his mind within a matter of seconds. Probably said, I like this better. So, but, I guess probably the best way, since I know that we're probably going to spoil the shit out of this story.
Oh, yeah, we have to.
Is that we're dealing with an actor who is we got Jay Scully. He's an actor, and he's got like the worst job ever. He's claustrophobic, and he's playing a vampire in a coffin. I'm like, this is fucking brilliant. That this guy couldn't find another fucking job. You know, I mean, it's like, well, wait a second. I know I've got this childhood trauma, but I can definitely play a vampire in a coffin that deals with my childhood trauma in the basement. Okay, I'll do it. You know, and and it's like, I don't know. It's like one of those things when I was talking about. If you think about this movie too much, it will fall apart in your hands. It will crumble. You can't think of it. You just have to experience it. Don't. If you try to analyze it too much, then you're like, oh, well, I just watched the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Thank God this show's not about analyzing things. And let's start there really fast. I had never seen this before, and I read spoilers before I went in because I knew I was only going to get one shot at this. And, in order to make it on time today. And I liked it for what it is. But even reading spoilers, maybe it was more obvious to me reading spoilers because you do lose everything except the plot. But I was like, this story doesn't add up. This story is absolutely crazy. And then I started thinking about De Palma, and I was like, is that the point? Like, is it you're so distracted by all of this that you accept the story? Because that's what he's doing to Jake. You're so distracted by this, you accept the story. And then I was like, is he our Sam? Like, is that the point of the film? Is he trying to make the audience this willing member? Because we do. We want to see the dance. We want to see the boobs. We want to see these women, right? Like, not even misogynist, like, I mean, just straight out, it's the show. That's what we're there for. Like, you get wrapped into it. And I feel like if he didn't do this on purpose, it worked really well. And if he did, this movie is a great level of trolling, and I think it's fantastic. What about you, Don? Like, do you think this story just fell apart for you? Did it bother you? Like, where are you at on this plot?
Well, it fell apart for me several times while I was watching it. Because I was texting you, and I'm like, I have a weird feeling about this because, again, I hadn't watched it since I was a kid, and when I watched it as a kid, it was one of those things where, like your cool uncle, he wants to, I guess, remain cool with his nephews, and he's like, oh, you want to watch this movie? It's got boobs in it. It was that type of situation. So there were a number of movies we watched in the 80s and early 90s that we only saw because we were those preteens and adolescents were like, oh my gosh, this movie has boobs. This would be awesome. And those of you who are younger, the internet was not around, so nudity and any sexual content was not readily available. So the fun, I guess the way that teenagers or even younger, the excuses that we had to watch movies were so juvenile, so asinine, and so ridiculous.
But go ask somebody how we watched the Spice Channel that we didn't pay for.
The Scramble Channel.
Yeah.
But no, what worked for me was I kept sitting there thinking, like, this shit isn't real. It's like it on so many levels. I'm like, well, this is way too easy. I even wrote down notes. I was like, why, the plants, are these fucking gremlin plants? He's got to water them after 6 o'clock. What is going on here? And I just thought it was weird. Even when his friend sets him up with or at least his assumed friend sets him up with this house to stay in, I'm like, this is all too convenient. This guy's down on his luck. This is it's James and I joke around all the time when something doesn't seem right because we went to go see Get Out a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And so every now and then I'll tell him something. He's like, and he'll respond back, how is none of this shit scaring you? And I'll do the same thing back to him. So when I watch these movies, I'm like, nah, dude, something's wrong. This is not right. Like, not only that, you're going to now take the opportunity to just peep on this woman. Because especially with the 2020 lens, it seems so extra fucking creepy. Mm-hmm. I mean, for me, the story didn't work. it did fall apart as the two of you established, but it was more fun to play around with what's falling apart to see how it's falling apart and how it should look. Because I mean, we'll go over it, but there are several parts where it pulls me out of the movie, and I'm thinking like, this shit ain't real. There's no way that would happen. No, that's not right. No. And I tried not to annoy James when I was rewatching it with all my texting and just like, there's no fucking way this would happen. No, this has to be a dream. This has to be a lie. This has to be a ruse on the director's part or something. Something hinky is going on here.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you feel about the Indians' makeup?
Jesus Christ. The first time that the quote unquote Indian shows up, my first thought was, okay, it's the 80s. The makeup is supposed to be shitty. But then I started thinking, no, that guy's obviously trying too hard to make it look like, some creepy looking guy. I didn't even know it was supposed to be an Indian until somebody says there was an Indian who killed her. I'm like, what the fuck? The guy looked like a zombie. What the hell's going on?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you got for that, Bob?
Well,
what's up with the makeup?
To me, I mean, I'm kind of going off of what you're saying, James. Is that, like, this is De Palma. Just, I think we've been trolled by a master troller who knew. I mean, and knowing the history behind this movie. I mean, when Scarface got, and the year before Scarface gets an X rating, and he has to go and cut again and again, and he'd already cut it 3 times, and they still give him an X rating. And De Palma's like, I think one of the quotes he said was, my next film is basically, he was like, oh, you gave that one an X rating? Well, hold my fucking beer, because now I'm going to really fuck with you. And of course, when Body Double came out, it got an X rating too, and he had to cut. And this was going on to a lot of films during that time. They were giving them all X rating, mainly for violence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I think that this was, now, even down to like the makeup, I think the makeup was like basically never meant to be looked at up close by any character. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was set. And so to that level of forethought is like, hey, no character is going to actually get a chance to see this makeup, but they do. That's what makes the story work,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, so at that point, it's like, hey, what do you think about this? And he's like, no, just make it shitty. They're not supposed to see it up close. And that's pretty much what they did.
I'd even take it a step further, and I would think this is De Palma not telling us every step of the story. And this is one thing that I love in movies that a lot of people hate, but I feel like that's Sam, or whatever his real name is, but the guy they call Sam, that's just Sam. Like, I feel like he would put the makeup on himself, right? Because he would have to. He couldn't tell anybody. It's not going to be perfect. He doesn't have a Hollywood crew doing this, right? Like, he's just a guy. So,
he's not
and
even
then
an
he's
actor.
supposed to be seen. Yeah, exactly. He's supposed to be seen from a distance all the time, like you're saying, not up close. So I think this is actually a great level of forethought on De Palma's part of where this guy would really be. Mm-hmm. and how it would work, but also the way that it comes off, how it like peels off of his face. If you were out and they started chasing you, it's easy to remove. And I'm sure that De Palma didn't even think in those terms, but it works. It works so well. And that's what I like so much about this, because while it is a totally shitty makeup job, it should be. Like that scene where he's wearing, I think it was a tank top, and you can see his white arms and then the makeup face. I love that, because why would you do your arms? There's no reason to do all that.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think it's great. But anyway, So let's go back to the very beginning for a minute, because I have a question that I want to know what you two think, because this ties into my De Palma doesn't tell us every detail of the story. I believe that Sam is the person fucking Jake's wife. And I believe this because they never show his face.
Right.
And they work really hard to not show his face. Mm-hmm. And if he's just some guy, there's no reason not to show us his face. But if this doesn't happen, and if Jake doesn't walk in on it and see it with his own eyes, none of the rest of this story works. So I believe that was Sam. What do you guys think?
I definitely agree. Because how else are you going to get him out of that house in order to set him up to be the perfect witness?
Right. I never thought of that before until you mentioned that. Because I've always, unfortunately been focused on the beautiful Barbara Crampton who plays Carol. And so it's like, and a lot of people, it's like, they're like, Barbara Crampton's in Body Double? I'm like, yeah, for just a second.
But that's the thing. That goes back to how Jake's distracted by everything. They're doing it to us again.
Right. And that's a train. If y'all hear that, I'm so sorry. I live by the railroad. It's a regular guest on our podcast, too.
Well, there you go.
But I never thought of that. I mean, that's holy shit. The level of man, this is like, now I'm getting an all new appreciation for a film I already appreciate.
And then what I like about that is it never comes up, because there's no reason for it to. There is no magic moment where he would go, oh, I'll bet Sam was the guy fucking my wife. But there's no villain monologuing, and there's none of that stuff. So I like that it never comes up and it's not answered.
That is fascinating.
But I felt like without that, Jake's not in all these positions where Sam is constantly supposedly running into him when he's clearly, purposely there. And then he magically has a place for him to go, and he knows, hey, you're hurting, and there's this girl. She'll cheer you up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
It's a really good theory too. And right when you mentioned that too, that's where, upon watching it for the umpteenth time, I realized that this is one of the parts that it falls apart, because Jake's got this, now he's house sitting at this really cool pad. I mean, like the coolest pad. It has circular rotating bed. He's got all the channels. All he has to do is water the plants. That's all he has to do. These gremlin plants that you have to water at night. And so he's and it's like, who in the hell, if you're basically decamped from your wife because it's her house, right? And you got no place else to go, and this guy's going, here's the keys to a really killer pad. And at this point in time, you're kind of like, you know what? Fuck that couch. I'm getting this pad. That's what he was doing. He was sleeping on the bartender's couch. Very small couch. Looked like a love seat.
Yeah.
And so he gets there. So this has all been set up because now this Sam Bouchard was having sex with Carol, which caused him to leave. He can't go home because it's her house. And he's down on his out. He's down and out. So did Sam know about the claustrophobia, or did he figure that out by following him? And that was just the icing on the cake. That's another little thing. But here's something that really kind of messed me up. You got the beautiful girl doing the beautiful dance. It's supposed to be Deborah Shelton. Basically, Gloria Ravel is the character's name. But instead, we get Melanie Griffith, who's doing this teasing, dance to lure Jake into this plot. How did they know that Gloria wasn't just going to suddenly come home while that was going on?
Yeah, I had issues with that as well.
I mean, he got like extremely lucky to get her there. You know,
The only thing I could think of was like maybe she had a standing appointment at that time. Like, I mean, it'd be a weird time for a spin class, but like maybe she had something she went to all the time, or he knew that that's when she hooks up with her boyfriend or whatever, like, because they clearly have marital problems, so I assume she could be doing anything, right? But maybe she worked during that time. I don't know. I just feel like because it's her husband, he knew the time that he could get away with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say it's never really made clear, but you make an interesting point though, because there could have been another guy. Because whenever she's on the phone by the beach, she does say that basically I need you. So she's talking to a lover.
Right.
So yeah. I never put that together. That's probably why it just seemed really convenient. It was like this one little ounce of convenience, and if she would have showed up, the whole thing would have been off, But like, then this other girl showed up, So I was like,
and she's joining. What's happening?
Yeah, I know, it's weird. I'm sorry, I'm back at the pad, dude, but you're gonna have to go.
Also, I had to kill them both. No, I also feel like it's so rushed. Like, he's only doing this for a few days. So maybe like he knew that she had something going on those days. And that goes back to Palma doesn't tell us everything, but it could also just be shitty writing. Like, I don't think he cared, but so like as a viewer instead, and I think Don, you probably had this same question. Like, okay. Isn't it weird that she leaves the windows open? Like if you were normally just this was all really taking place. Like, this is weird that this chick does this every single night at the same time. If you accepted all of this at face value, right? Wouldn't that be weird? Maybe if it was every Friday. No.
I don't know. Like if Sam the friend is sitting there saying like, oh, she does it every night around this time. Oh, here's the show. All that stuff. It's almost, if you come in there as Jake and he's telling you this, you might not be asking any questions. You're like, well, fuck it. Here's the telescope. I'm going to look. Okay, the windows are open. This is awesome. Because again, you're thinking with the adolescent brain and like, oh, I'm going to get to see some naked woman doing a dance or probably, pleasuring herself or whatever. That question isn't going to come up as the person, as that witness or that perfect witness that he is. Why are her blinds open? Why are her curtains open? It's more like, holy shit, that load bearing load bearing beam got in the way. God damn it. So
that's a good point. And you can't underestimate his trauma at the time either, with everything he's personally going through.
It's totally believable. Plus, if you're talking about the claustrophobia, you look at both those houses. Both those houses are completely open. I mean, as far as you got that panoramic view in the, I called it the flying saucer house, and then you have those massive windows that are in the other house that she happens to be in, doing her show. So he's and even with that, you've got this wide range of a view to where now he's comfortable. He's not confined like he was in the casket. Now he's comfortable. He's distracted by sex. He's in this lush, nice apartment. He's overly, I guess, comfortable. So you're not going to ask those questions.
True.
And it allows him to. I mean, here's the whole thing: is that, and this is part of the story that we find out, and of course, in subsequent viewings we know this now. But not only is he supposed to watch the girl, but he needs to see the quote unquote Indian.
Mm-hmm.
That's important to the story. And that's one of the things that me and Michael brought into their watching is like, if you can see something and you realize that someone else is also watching what you're seeing, and how do you react to that? How do you channel that obsession into a way that you can see that now you're really messing with something that could be quite dangerous. And it's, to me, I think that's really cool because when we first watch it, we're like, okay, this now he's seeing this guy. What the hell? This guy. And of course the Indian's playing it off like, hey, look, there's a hot chick up there. I'm going to check her out. And then you realize that this guy is not only checking her out, but he's scoping out the place. He's checking out the layout. He's cutting off the power. He's doing all this stuff, to where he can see everything. And it's just, what the hell, man? It's like part of your lizard brain's going, you're being set up. But at the same time, you can't stop watching. You don't realize it until later. And you're like, oh, I knew he was getting set up. I knew it. I could have told you that from the very beginning, but I didn't.
Because I was busy.
I was busy looking at Deborah Shelton / Melanie Griffith doing a sexy dance, and I didn't really care about the Indian until he got dangerous.
He stood in the way.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's neat how you can kind of understand how our main character Jake would fall for all this. Mm-hmm. Between what he's going through in his daily life, and then it's an overstimulating. It's an overly exciting day now after your life has been shit the last week. Like, all this great stuff is happening. It makes so much sense that he would be blind enough to fall for this. But I want to go back 1 second to the scene where he walks in on his wife, because I feel like his reaction is extremely important to this story. He doesn't get mad. He doesn't yell. He doesn't attack her. He doesn't slam the door. He literally just stares at her and then closes the door and leaves. And I think that reaction tells Sam everything he needs to know about what kind of witness he thinks Jake is going to be. He doesn't think Jake's the guy that's going to run over there and try to solve it. He doesn't think that Jake's going to come and attack or anything like that. He thinks that Jake is going to watch and be the guy that calls the cops.
Which is exactly what he wants him to do.
Yeah. And that's his miscalculation in some ways.
I agree. Now it just seems like totally insane to think that there's no one else other than Sam that could have been having sex with Carol.
Yes, I'm convincing others. This is my new life goal.
It's just we didn't know. I mean, I wonder, and this is the thing, though. I wonder if De Palma knew.
I'm going to go back and pull up that scene and pause it and look at his nose and compare them. No, I'm just kidding.
And you're going to find out it was Brian De Palma in bed.
I'm going to say there's a man in that scene. Oh, anyway. So.
There is, but you deliberately cannot see his face.
No, they work really hard to hide it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the camera even kind of turns and they still hide his face. Yeah.
It's kind of.
So I think it's Sam. Anyway. But no, I feel like that reaction is not necessarily a test, but I think that it tells us what kind of person we should expect Jake to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because any of us, normally when you see that reaction in a movie, all hell breaks loose. There's a big fight scene. There's the get the fuck out of the house and, all that shit. We don't get any of that. It's just like fucking Charlie Brown turning around with that sad little song,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and it's something that I don't think you really think about it. But I mean, other than, I guess you think that Jake's just a really nice guy who's just super down on his luck.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what Sam sees in him is like, this guy, he ain't gonna do anything. He's just gonna call the cops, which is exactly what I need him to do. And then, of course, I guess Jake finds a pair, and he grows a pair and decides to overcome, his fear, which is, I guess, his biggest fear is himself, if you want to get all philosophical about it, but he has claustrophobia. So,
well, even on his
yeah,
even
go
on
ahead.
his route to find himself, right? I guess that next day he starts following, or at least he sees Gloria in her car, and he's being delayed because of the landscapers that are out there, and then he sees the Indian, or presume the Indian, down the road. And he decides, I'm going to follow her because I see him following her. And I want to, I guess at this moment, he goes from being a witness to, or at least the plan for him to be a witness to, now I'm a private eye, I'm a detective. I'm going to follow you around and see exactly what's going on, which I'm sure the two of you, everything about this scene didn't make sense, because it didn't for me, because I would like to think that if you're following someone around, you at least give them a little distance, as opposed to being one phone over and pretending to have a conversation. And then you end it with, yes, okay, bye. And then you're one step behind them up the escalator. And then you follow them till they go to, a lingerie store. And then you sit there and watch them put on lingerie, which, I took all types of notes while I was watching this. Was like, what kind of a fucking store has the changing room by the window? And what kind of store allows people to test drive panties?
Right?
It's like this is interesting. But yeah, with him following her around, this is when I wrote down, I was like, creepy, fucking creeper. And because I found that very strange, because I started to think like, okay, well, maybe he's going to get framed for a crime, before this whole thing about him being a witness is brought forth. I'm like, maybe he's being set up to be an assailant or a murderer or something like that, where they have to get him in the house somehow to get his DNA or get his fingerprints or something. Because I was just trying to figure out why he's following her, and he follows her all the way to the beach. Like there were like 2 or 3 stops, and he finally gets to the beach and is stalking her out at the beach, and says the this is the line that I like, that other than the one that James pointed out, which is, he finally walks up to her and says, "Someone's following you, and it's not me." I busted out laughing, because her reaction is not what I thought it should have been, her reaction should have been, "Why are you following me? You've been following me all day. Do I need to call the police? Do I need to do something?" But before you even get to that part, as the two of you have pointed out, the Indian with his bad makeup and farmer tan runs up and steals the purse. But again, you're so distracted, you're not paying attention. It's great. It's a great job of directing and filmmaking, because you're so concentrated on, okay, what is Creeper Jake going to do at this moment? Okay, we're following Gloria. We're checking her out. We know the Indian's around here somewhere because we just saw him walk up. And you're so focused on what's going to happen, you're not paying attention to, all these little details that wouldn't make sense. Like, him having a really bad suntan, or bad tan lines, in pretending to be an Indian, and then stealing the purse.
Yeah, I mean, and it's, well, I don't want to mention this just yet, because I have an overall theory about the entire movie.
Cool.
But it's, if going back to what you're saying, even if the police suspected Jake as being an accomplice, or someone who did the murder, that would be even better for Sam.
Yeah.
So he didn't care at that point. So I mean, it's like this loose little detail that can go either way. It's like, fuck, if he could be the witness and get me out of the deal, Or they could even think he's part of the deal. That's even better for me. But I guess I can go ahead and say my overall theory. I think that the whole movie is actually, I know this is going to sound stupid, but it's a movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a movie within a movie.
Right.
We're being fucked with from the first scene.
Oh yeah.
And
There's countless movies within the movies. Yeah.
Yes.
Continue.
From the very first scene, we have claustrophobic Jake, who's playing a vampire who can't get out of his coffin, and gets sent home. And as he's walking out of the set, the movie sets continuously change behind him. And then he gets in his car with some extremely obvious background scene projected through the back window of the car. Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, it's like, I've seen some bad background scenes. I've seen the cars where the steering wheel doesn't move, just their hands move.
I love those.
Yeah, and it's like, really, you can get a fucking car that was fake with a real steering wheel?
I'm always reminded of Car 54 because that was the first time I ever noticed it when I was a kid watching reruns. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
It's like, and that reminds me, my dad's actually the one who told me that about Car 54.
Nice.
When he was growing up, he rode with his dad somewhere, and they had in the old car they had that old hard plastic steering wheel. Mm-hmm. So my dad, rest his soul, he was a kid, just like I was at one time, and he would, while he was waiting on his dad, my grandfather, to get out of the store, my dad was taking the cigarette lighter and heating it up and sinking it into the steering wheel, just making little rings around the steering wheel, not realizing that when he pulled it out, it was going to like leave like an impression, but it was also going to kind of pull the plastic up a little bit. Oh my and that plastic would dry after a while. So they said the first time they didn't have power steering, he said he pretty much had a ring all the way around it. And of course his dad beat his ass for that. And he says, but his dad gave him a double beating for cutting his hand on the steering wheel when he was trying to steer the car. Because that hard plastic had cut into his hand. And and I'm sitting there going, at least the steering wheel turns in this guy's car. But the rear window projection is so it's not terribly bad. I've seen worse, but I mean, it's like, to me, it was done obviously. And then, it's like from every point, even though the plot doesn't work, I mean, I feel like if we had De Palma on here, it'd be like, of course it's a movie within a movie within a movie. Mm-hmm. And it's not supposed to work. But it does. It was just entertainment. And I feel like that's, like you said, we were being trolled the whole time. And I think it's from the very first scene.
No, I agree. Maybe it's the English major in me obsessed with the play within the play, right? But movie within a movie throughout this entire thing, whether it's porn shoots, whether it's like just that scene where they close the door and the mirror's on there and you actively see people shooting a film. Mm-hmm. Like there's all these little nods to it, but there's always more movies going on. And even the very last scene going into the credits where they bring in the body double for the boobs, right, and then they're cutting back and forth to show you that what you see you can't accept. Mm-hmm. And I think that you're right. I think that's the entire point. And here's my kicker for you. What's the name of the guy who plays Jake? Craig
Wasson.
Thank you. He's a better actor than this. And I feel like there's points where he's purposely terribly acting.
Right.
If that makes sense. And I think if you look at this as an actual movie, I mean, it is a movie, but you know what I'm saying? If it's a movie that we're watching within a movie, I feel like he makes more sense. I feel like he is a shitty actor and this stuff is happening because he's a way better actor than he is in this film.
Oh, yeah.
And it also explains like the weird shit, like when he suddenly changes his whole image or like many times, and I don't know. So much of it makes more sense if you accept that none of this is real.
Right. I think pretty much, I think that the point that's going to nail it home for most viewers, especially watching it for the first time, is the Frankie Goes to Hollywood scene.
Which, I loved that scene.
This was your first time seeing the film.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if the spoilers mention that, but that
they do. They just what I read literally said, what is it? Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Is that the name of the band?
Yeah.
That they play Relax and there's a dance number. And I was like, this is not a dance number. I'm so glad that my summary got this wrong because this is fucking insane.
Yes.
And I really like weird shit like this, though. So I think like I was the ideal audience for this moment. So, yeah, it was my favorite part of the whole film.
Yeah, it is quite cool because, I mean, at that time, Relax was already out. I'm pretty sure it was already out because we had to know. The first time I seen the film was on VHS, so maybe it came out at the same time during the theatrical release. But we had already seen the video with the laser lights and everything like that Frankie Goes to Hollywood for Relax, and everyone in the world has seen that video, and it's a great video. And Frankie Goes to Hollywood was a great band. But to see it in this fucking film, and you're like going, that's Holly Johnson. Fuck, that's the fucking band. Holy, what the fuck? And the first time I seen it, my jaw just hit the ground. I was like, I cannot believe this. And then I was like, I love it. It's the coolest thing in the world. But that is the nail in the coffin going boom, 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 boom. We're in a movie.
Yeah. It doesn't fit anything. It's so great. And they never take the time to say, oh, this is what we're filming. And I don't know, maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention, so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But I love that the porn producer guy says these lines. And then Melanie Griffith says the exact same lines because he was basically reading script at that point. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was such a nice touch because you lose this line. Like, we know weird shit's happening now and we kind of get a feel of what's happening, but it could be a dream. It could be, I mean, let's face it, it's the 80s. It could be a drug-induced whatever, right? So we don't fully know what's happening when this Relax song hits. And then you get to the where they literally show you the people filming it and she's starting to recite the same lines. And I don't know, like there's so much about it that really fits your theory that this is a movie within a movie within a movie within a movie, because we do just get that full, there's no line. That's what I'm trying to say. There's no separation between them.
No, the lines are blurred, and in a lot of cases they're beyond blurred. They become like deformed, and that's a terrible word. But
that is a great word. That's totally what this is. The lines don't make sense. They are deformed. Wow. I like that. You can feel free to hate it.
It's just, but it's funny because we started talking about this as being like a film that if you thought about it too much, then it falls apart. But again, if you think about it too much, you realize the genius of it. and to me, that's like it can go either way. So, and I love that.
Which one is it, Don? Is this terrible and we're playing revisionist history?
No.
Do you think that there's a big?
It's not terrible at all. And I'm going to go back a little bit to come back to where we are. When Jake figures out that something is funny when he sees the commercial for Holly Does Hollywood, and he sees the dance and he's like, oh shit, something's off. I just love his whole idea of, what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to the video store, get the porn that she's in, then contact the porn company, then go there for an audition. Oh, and then I'm going to star in the movie. So again, this is one of those moments where I'm like, this shit isn't happening. This isn't part of the story. It's like,
way too convoluted.
Yeah, no one just goes and I started laughing when he walks in and this one actor is just pissed off and enraged. It's like, I'm not just some fucking stunt cock. I'm an actor. And Jake just walks by, does his audition, with the producer, and I'm sitting here thinking, like, I don't know that much about the world of porn, but I'm pretty sure it involves a lot more than just reading a couple of lines. I'm sure there's something else involved. And they bring that up when they have this Frankie Goes to Hollywood relax scene, and Jake and Holly are getting on, and then somebody says, "Hey, where's the cum shot?" And again, it's one of those things that the distraction from the distraction, or all these different smoke and mirrors that they're playing around with you by having this movie within a movie, it cubed, where it does become fun to play with what's going on here, and it makes you question, well, shit, what happened to the murder mystery here? Where did we go? Now we're in the middle of a porn music video, and then you were talking about lines being blurred, but then you also see how Jake's lines within his own life get blurred because he runs into somebody he knows, and now there's this new identity or creation that he has. He's got his hair all slicked back because he's porn guy now, where his acting friend he runs into, and now you got Melanie Griffith's character Holly that is now part of his world, and so they're starting to merge. And you see how those two worlds kind of collide in a funny way or in a comical way, because he's trying to hide who Holly is. And Holly is, I guess, too pure into porn to where she thinks that this woman is asking her for tips about getting a job in porn.
I love this scene.
She's like, "Oh, talk to Max. He'll hook you up." Well, I don't know. How do you not know Max? Everybody in town knows that guy. And I would just imagine, I would love a scene where, I mean, this would be something that would be done in a movie now, but I would love that scene where, Jake's friend calls the number, goes for the audition, and then finds out that it's not what she thought it was. She was thinking it was going to be something Shakespearean. And she gets there and it's like, "Oh, let's see you with the top off. Oh, we're doing it, such and such style." Yeah.
And seeing, I had this kind of feeling though that Melanie Griffith's character was kind of new, that she wasn't into it and was being a little sarcastic. It's just, I don't know, it's the way that she delivered some of the lines. It was like, I think that even though she was like, telling her, giving her some tips, in the back of her character's mind, she's like, this girl is not into the same business I'm into at all.
I could totally see that.
And so she was kind of trolling her too. Yeah, she just seemed like I don't know, it's like part of her knew that she was kind of being set up for something, but she was willing to go along with it. And I mean, and it makes sense because she had previously been set up by Sam to do something else. So she, she's a hustler. She wants the money. And so she's kind of game for anything. But she has rules. And so she laid out her rules, And as long as Jake doesn't deviate from those rules, then she's game for anything except for, whatever crazy psychosexual hijinks he has in store for her later. So she thinks,
Right.
And to me, that's when she, is like, "Hey, I've got lines that I won't cross, and I don't know what the hell you're into, but I don't want no part of it, And she's, to me, that's showing like a vulnerability that we probably wouldn't have gotten with Annette Haven playing the role. Because like I said, Annette can act. There was no doubt about it. But she's not a actress like Melanie Griffith was. So she, you know, her meetings are, how are your knees? Can you stay on them for a while? You know, have you had any surgeries lately? You know, things like that. Where Melody's are, she gets to read. And I'm probably being very, very mean about the whole sex work industry, which because sex work is real work, and we know this. And everything has time and place and meaning and all that. But so that's me just being really kind of shitty and funny at the same time. And probably not that funny, but.
You know, for me, I like how much this gives her agency. Like, she feels very in control here at first. Mm-hmm. Like, she thinks that this is a normal business thing, and she's laying down her rules. She doesn't care what his rules are. These are my rules. Right. And I really like how you get these little glimpses of how women get agency in this film. Because one of the big complaints against De Palma is always misogyny, and whether he's toying with misogyny or if he's actually being misogynistic or what's going on here. And you have these two great scenes for sure where women have a ton of agency. And the first is at the beach when Gloria kisses him. Like, she takes over that moment. It's her choice. She goes from being this sexual object to the one with agency making the move, right? And then you have this moment where Holly, that's her name, right? Mm-hmm. Is laying down the rules of what she's willing to do, but doesn't give a shit what your rules are. And I like that these two little moments are in here. And maybe there's more, but those are the two popping out to me right now. But I think that it's such an interesting point when De Palma took so much shit for the things he had done before, that these two moments are in here and they're so blatant. To me, that's extremely purposeful and very much a fuck you to everybody that accused him of this stuff, whether it was rightful or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think that when he made this film, it was his hold my beer moment. Oh
yeah.
He wanted to make a controversial film because everyone thought his previous films were somewhat controversial when he didn't think that they were at all. Mm-hmm. So he purposely made a controversial film. But at the same time, I don't think I think that, and it's really kind of hard to talk about this because there was a ton of movies that are well regarded, but if you look at them at a modern eye, you can see that they're very misogynistic and you can see that they're very problematic. And, so, the general excuse is, well, it was a different time. Not really. We just didn't give a shit back then.
Yep.
Right.
That's the reality of it, is that we didn't really care. We care now, and we care now for all the right reasons. And that's what I was saying earlier, that this film probably couldn't be made today, and not in a sense they couldn't do a scene by scene, take for take.
Yeah,
the story could be made, and it would be heavily modified. And I can tell you one thing, that the women in this movie would have a lot more agency than they do in this film. So I would not be surprised if we would see some of the roles reversed. And for probably, with good reason. I would love to see something like that. And that was one of the reasons that me and Michael wanted to tackle, and they're watching this subject, because we see in this film, Jake is basically, he's not really a creep. He's just a normal guy. He's going through a really, really rough time. He's actually a very nice guy. He wears his emotions on his sleeve. We suddenly become more and more and more sympathetic to him because he's so easily relatable. We've all had our heart broken. We've all been that guy who's walked away from something that was terrible. We've all had fears and things like that. So he's a reflection of ourselves. But then when we realize that something isn't wrong, we also realize, hey, what? Something's not right. Something's not right. I've got to fix this, And that's what makes him kind of heroic, and he has to fight through his own problems himself. He doesn't have any help from anyone else. He just knows he has to do it, especially because his life is on the line now, So me and Michael, we wanted to take that and do the opposite of it and have somebody who starts off very nice, and as it goes through, he gets himself into some very, very terrible situations, but you begin to lose sympathy for this character. And so to see it played this way is interesting. It's just a totally different take than what we wanted to do, but it's his character is infinitely relatable. It's very strange that you would have this type of character and go, I can see where he's coming from.
So 2 things, and then I'm going to kick this to Don with a question.
Okay.
You were just saying how your character becomes less and less likable, and I think that that's one of the places where this merging with the Wicker Man comes in. We just did the Wicker Man episode last week. We talked about how Detective Howie goes from this stand-up, I'm a police officer, and before it's over, you're kind of like, you're a fucking dick who won't accept anyone around him who feels differently, you know? And you lose that desire for him to win, kind of. Maybe not completely, but so I think that it's interesting because, you know, your book is a mix of the two, or not a mix of the two, but, you know, it's you describe it as a mix of the two. And so I think that really plays into that part, and I just wanted to throw that in. But to go back to something else you were saying, you said there's a lot of movies that we could go back to and they're problematic. They're literally parodying one of them in the porn scenes because they're doing Gone with the Wind, which is Don's favorite movie of all time, right, Don?
Oh, God. No.
Would you say it's that one or Birth of a Nation? I can never remember.
Oh, God. I've seen Birth of a Nation more times than I've seen Gone with the Wind. But that's not
I know.
I like it.
No, we've talked in the past about how not even problematic. Gone with the Wind is just a lot of really bad themes going on. But I think it's interesting that they kind of have this throw to Gone with the Wind in the porn scene, and then, you know, we were talking about problematic, so I had to ask you about it.
Yeah, so.
But
and you know what? There are a lot of movies, because the one thing I always hate that someone brings up at a convention or class or even online, like in social media, this movie would never be made today. Yes, it would, but some things would change because there's no way. I for one, I used to love Revenge of the Nerds as a kid.
Yeah.
Because I didn't see what the problems were because I was a kid when I saw it. Then I got older and then I saw all the fucking problems. Then I became an adult and I saw even more of the problems. Like breaking in to a sorority house and then placing cameras so you can watch these women naked all the time, or a rape scene. And, you know, they make it okay because he's the hero and he's good. He's a good guy. He just wanted to show her that he knew how to have sex. Yeah, but you still raped the woman because she didn't consent to that. But yeah, I mean, I could see a lot of movies. I could see this movie, as you said, Bob, I could see this movie being remade, but not shot for shot. I mean, there's the core of the movie could be remade, or adapted in some way. But there's definitely some stuff that's not going to make it because, one, you got a different audience, you got a different climate. You're definitely going to have more voices in the room that are going to tell you, like, this isn't going to work, this isn't good, this doesn't make sense. You know, it's not a good look. The studio's not going to be cool with this, and your audiences are going to destroy you if you have something like this. But
that could be 90% of the fun, though, if you're doing it the way De Palma did.
Well, yeah. If you do it like that way, or you know, James and you and I've talked about this before. Like even the trauma films themselves, like they used to love to have fun with being offensive, but they were doing it to make you cringe, to realize like this is not the way we should behave in a real world situation. So we're going to give it to you in this crazy whacked out movie. So I mean, I could see it done that same way. We're going to do it to be ironic or to be satirical. But as far as a serious film where they actually are invested in whatever that is, I don't see it happening.
Yeah.
And I definitely wouldn't want to see it happen.
I think it's interesting to note as well that this film was made pretty much near the end of, I guess, what Peter Biscon would call the auteur era of filmmaking, where directors and producers had a lot more power in studios. And we're seeing that these last couple of films that De Palma made, including Body Double, were hit with, cut after cut after, and then getting X ratings and things like that. Because the studios were being bought up by mom and pop things. I mean, Columbia was owned by Coca-Cola, so they had to have this, kind of family thing. And it was just, in De Palma's, he kind of came up during the auteur, and I'm probably not even saying that word right, so forgive me. But when film directors and producers controlled Hollywood, and then they, basically, it's I made a film, and the studios were like, we would love to have it, and then now it's like I made a film, and it's like we're gonna cut your film, because right. And so it's like the loss of control, and of course, someone like De Palma who had it and now he's lost it, he's going to fight it, he definitely was trying to make something that was going to be offensive. But at the same time, he also wanted to hold that mirror up to the industry that was shaping his, the decisions he had to make.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because I'm just going to skip to the very, very end. I've already brought this up once, but the final scene going into the credits, that shower scene where they keep going back to the face and then to the body double. If you go back to Dress to Kill, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the opening scene is the shower scene. Mm-hmm. And that's the one that De Palma got. They kept cutting it because there was like a tiny little bit of pubic hair showing, and I guess like the first time there was quite a bit, and then he cut it and he had left like a tiny little bit, like in one little flash or something. They made him cut it again, and I just think it's so great that like this final fuck you in this film is a shower scene. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that the two are tied in, but it seems like it'd be really funny to me if they were. so to me it's headcanon.
Oh yeah, I mean it's that's kind of like that really kind of solidifies my theory that it's a film within a film within a film. It's a lot more than its surface. Mm-hmm. You have to watch it repeatedly to get into the meat of it, And I mean, of course, we're all just speculating. We're shooting from our hip here, but I have a feeling that we're on the right track with this, And of course, it's just like if we had a chance to interview and talk with, Brian De Palma and tell him all this stuff, he could just smile and say, yeah, pretty much. Or he could say, it's just a fucking movie.
Right. But is it a movie within a movie, Mr. De Palma?
Yeah, but is it a movie within a movie within a movie?
And then you take into account that clearly Vertigo and Rear Window were huge influences on this film. Oh yeah. And so you have a murder in a shower as well. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't know that that's tied in, but I think it's a nice little added bonus. Many Hitchcockian things going on.
Yeah, it's like even point of view that like the famous kill scene with the drill.
Oh, I loved that.
You get dramatic irony the whole scene. You get to see the drill. You get to see the cord's not going to be long enough. You get to see that he's going to plug the drill back in once she falls over on the other side. And you also get to know because Jake is downstairs getting attacked by a dog who suspiciously did not attack the Indian. Weird deal. So you get all this stuff, and you get these cuts to the ceiling, which is pure Hitchcock. You know, I remember seeing an interview with Hitchcock, you know, and in his famous voice say, you know, it's like they had a scene where he's like, you show a clock underneath the desk, and you got two men sitting underneath the desk, and the clock is ticking, but you keep showing a clock, but they don't know it. And he's like, the desk could just blow up at any second, you know. It's like, but he goes, the only person that knows it is the audience, and that's what creates suspense. We know that drill bit's going to come through the ceiling, and we know it's going to be gory, and we know that Gloria is going to be dead, and that's when things get like really serious for the film.
No, I love everything about this scene. Like the shot is just fucking fantastic. I mean, you can't get more phallic than this, can you, Don? We've talked a lot about phallic imagery on this show. Is there a more phallic? He's literally gonna drill this chick in her bedroom.
Mm-hmm. Through the floor.
Come on.
Through the floor.
It's crazy. So,
and who's going to use a drill bit that big with that kind of girth?
Biggest drill
to get into that small of a safe. I mean, because we see the safe. It's not very big. The drill bit's almost as big as a safe.
Look, it was to scare the safe to open up. Like,
oh shit!
You open up, or I'm going to drill you with this. All right, unlocking. Click, click, click.
Well, and what was his plan? She's downstairs. I'm going to drill this giant thing, and then she's going to hear me and call the police. It's another thing that doesn't add up.
It's like I'm feeling though that we're seeing the end of that. I think that he had already drilled. I think when we first see him in the room that safe is actually already open.
And so, I feel like it's really more there for Jake. It's to make sure you can see what I'm doing.
Right.
Like maybe not the kill scene, but like the initial, like when he knows Jake is watching.
He didn't intend for Jake to be in the house when he killed her. I don't think that he intended to kill her with the drill. I think that he intended to kill her. But I don't know, man. It's just so weird because correct me if I'm wrong, but Sam calls him right before he calls Gloria, right?
Yes. Yeah, Sam calls him and makes sure that he's watching. Because he's like, how's our neighbor doing?
Yeah. Okay. So of course, you know, and we know the Indian is Sam. So, okay. So now I'm really I'm having a problem with this whole, he calls and then he knows that Jake's going to call Gloria. And it's like, what if he didn't hang up the phone properly on a landline, and all Jake would get would like, in other words, like how lucky did he get that this shit just actually fucking worked, you know? And I don't know, man. It's just, to me, it's like there's a lot of luck, and that's when it starts to fall apart. But it's supposed to. That's the key. It's supposed to fall apart. It's such a fucking deep movie, man.
Well, and I mean, it's so great because he knows Jake's watching. So when Jake calls her, she picks up the phone, and that's what he's going to kill her with. It's not the drill. He's going to choke her out. He's going to make sure Jake was watching, because what Jake's testimony does, Jake's testimony distinctly says this was an Indian man. He was huge, and he had a crazy face, and it's definitely not her husband. I know that much.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of Jake doing all of this, right? Is that scene. Mm-hmm. And so when she gets out of the telephone and she knocks Sam out as well, and they're laying on the bed, you know, that's where everything went to shit. Well, at this point, Sam's fucking pissed. Plus, he's still got to do it, and so he grabs a drill and then we get this great fucking visual. But there's no way, like, he doesn't like purposely drill through the floor to bleed on Jake. But God, that's a fucking great moment, isn't it?
It is. But I really think at that point right there, going back to what I was saying earlier, he didn't expect Jake to be in the house.
No, absolutely not.
He
and
was
that goes back
actually
to
kind of like, holy shit, he's actually in the house.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I was saying with the reaction when I believe Sam is having sex with Jake's wife. That reaction of Jake just leaving and not doing anything and not being the fighting type. He absolutely does not expect Jake to come to the rescue here. Mm-hmm. And for Sam, thank God you brought your dog. Not so much for everybody else involved. Mm-hmm. If that dog's not there, I think that Jake, maybe he doesn't make the save, but I think that he gets Sam here. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like really good misdirection too, because we don't realize that the dog wasn't attacking the man. All we see is the dog attacking Jake, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, and it's not really brought up until Jake brings it up later. So it's kind of like one of those convenient script things, you know. It's like part of the story that was left out. Then like, well, let's include it. You know, we're definitely going to come back to that. So it's like you're skillful misdirection. And this movie is full of that. And it's just, man, you can learn from this shit.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, Jake is got Holly to come back to the pad and has got Holly to admit that she was, you know, doing a dance. She would hire to do this dance. And so Jake would watch. And she don't really know anything. She gets extremely pissed off when Jake basically tells her that a woman was killed there. Like, and I guess she feels like that he's implying that she's involved, you know. So she gets like really kind of pissed off, and that's when we get to see the real Holly body. I think that's when the gloves are off. You're not going to do this shit to me.
Right.
And that's when, you know, anybody who's watching this film, you want to see an actress come into her own. That's when Melanie Griffith came into her own right there. Because her character literally does almost a 180 degree turn for the better. And it's just, I couldn't stop watching her. I was like, oh my God, this is just every single thing about it. It's like she wasn't even acting. This was all just natural to her.
I like how she wants to leave, but she also wants to know. And I think that that's incredibly natural. And I don't know. I feel like that doesn't happen enough in stories. Like, I don't know, at least something like this where somebody's been used like this. I feel like people tend to go one way or the other. They either kind of like, oh, tell me everything, or they're like, fuck you, I don't want to hear any of this. And I like how she has that piece tearing at her. Like, I want to know what you're talking about, but I also think this is a huge red flag and I need to get the fuck out of here. So, and I don't know, it really brings in that vulnerability you were talking about, as well as her agency, as well as just, it allows us to get the monologue without it feeling like, let's stop the movie, kids, and tell you what happened.
Right, exactly. We now know fully what's been going on, and we're so enthralled in the events that happened that, and of course, you know, this is probably the Palma's either master plan or it's just a really shitty story. But at this point, he's kind of like, they're not going to care. They're not going to care. They're not even going to think about it. They're just going to roll with this. They're just going to roll with it, you know. So she does leave though. She does leave after all that, and she's basically, she don't want no part of anything he has going on, and she's walking down the street screaming at cars. And then how coincidental that there would be an accident on two racing cars. To me, this is one part of the movie that it's like, really? There's a fucking accident. And then she ends up getting a ride from who else but the Indian.
What are the odds?
What are the odds of this actually happening? And it's just like, if you start to think about this and not realize that you're being trolled, you're like, okay, this is really stupid. But at the same time, it's like, of course this is going to happen.
Well, and this goes back to the whole
type of movie.
Yeah, and if it's a movie within a movie, then it's definitely like, this is one of the biggest nods to me that none of this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Because the odds of each of those things happening directly in front of this house where she is, not great, right? And then, but both of them happening within, what, a minute of each other?
Right.
This feels like one of those shitty detective books that I read when I was younger, that I still adore, by the way. And people just tried too hard to make their plot come together. And to me, this entire thing is too well done when it's done properly for this kind of shit not to be extremely purposeful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like this is a nod that none of this is real. Because she does immediately get in with the Indian. But on top of that, Jake immediately finds them.
Mm-hmm. He
That's
just so
nuts.
happens
Three
to see
things.
the silhouette. And
He sees the supposed killing and everything.
Mm-hmm. And it's just, I don't know. It's just, and then of course we have this ending at the reservoir with these cascading waterfalls, man-made obviously, but still, and it's like, where else are they going to have this big, this big finale at, and it's I guess that he just had, I don't know, it was so Hollywood, it's pathetic.
Why would you dig a hole here? There's no reason to bury a body here. None. What do you do with the body? You throw it in the fucking water right there.
Yes. But he's going to dig a hole in an area where, yeah, it's just.
And then crazy. Another nod that this isn't real to me, because it's all this section that screams to me that this is all ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
When everything else ends and he battles out of his claustrophobia and Sam is knocked into the reservoir and disappears, she immediately pops the fuck up.
Mm-hmm.
She's suddenly alive. She's suddenly totally with it. This reeks of terrible writing, but not in the way that I think this is a shitty script. This reeks of, I purposely made this terrible fucking ending. There's no other explanation for everything that happens in this 10-minute span. And she pops up and she's like, what? Who? There's nobody else here.
Right.
It's just, it's so ingrained. The only thing that would have sealed the deal, and I liked how he didn't seal the deal, is at the final scene. Of course, we do see Holly at the very final scene when they're making the movie with the body double. But would have been really cool would have been to see, the actress who played Gloria standing close by. Like she's not even dead. That would have been the deal. Another thing that would have been cool is that they could have got Barbara Crampton as come back in as the body double.
Oh, but, man.
Because then it's like, hey, isn't that Carol? That's his wife. And it's like, now I don't know if these are things that were possibly considered or not. I'm just speculating here. But without doing those things, you're left at, when you first watched the movie. I remember when I was a kid, I was like, wow, that was one of the baddest ass movies I've ever fucking seen. You know, and I was like, and it's like you turn your friends onto it, and you have that one friend that's going, so actually the story just doesn't hold up. It's like, who cares? It's still a good movie. You know, it's not. Yes, it is. You know, so. You go through all these emotions about it, and as you become smarter and an adult, and you know how to you write, and you know how to create, and you learn what makes a good story, and you're like, this isn't really a good story. But then the brilliance of it is greater than that. I don't know.
Don, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I was going to say that the only other thing, and this is going into the credits, that pulls you back out and talks about, or at least it examines the way that what you see in a film is not reality, right? I mean, You've got all these things that are represented in the film that aren't reality, but the filmmaking process demonstrates what reality is and isn't, because you have the one actress that Sam goes up, I'm sorry, not Sam, that Jake goes up to, bite as the vampire, right? And they immediately call for the body double. And the first thing she says is, not too rough or something like that. But she's like, I'm on my period. My nipples, are really sensitive. And I was just thinking to myself, like, how many films have probably been made like that where, it's a love scene or, a violent scene like that. Or, there's this idea of, or this air of reality that gets broken. Mm-hmm. And what we see is the fantasy, right? And that's kind of what Jake has been subjecting all of us to, or the Palma's been subjecting us to the entire film, is this crazily woven fantasy. And if you pull that curtain back, you see what's really going on, and you think about it. Whereas when that scene happens with the body double, and she mentions I'm on my period, my nipples are sensitive, don't play with them too much, don't be too rough, blah blah blah. I'm just thinking about, okay, if I saw this scene in a film without that, I would have never considered that. It takes the sexiness out of it, because it's a job. It's ho-hum. It's very just mundane. There's nothing about it, as opposed to when he first gets in the shower with the woman and he's nuzzling up against her and rubbing her and stuff like that. And you're like, oh man, this is kind of a cool vampire scene. This would be really cool. And then that fantasy is broken by the director calling for it to stop, or for Dennis Franz like showing up behind them, like, all right, let's go ahead and let's stop this scene. Hold your hand right there. Bring in the double. Okay, you stand here. Okay, nope, keep the line right there between these two fingers. And so that whole thing, when they're shouting the directions or the stage direction is going on, you've got all those assistants there helping out. You immediately think about how well crafted this fantasy was to distract you from reality, and vice versa. How the fantasy can distract you. The reality can distract you from the fantasy that's been created, and how well filmmakers can be at this in a lot of times. Unless they're really bad filmmakers. You see all the cables and booms and extra cameras around the studio while they're filming, and you're like, yeah, this is definitely a movie. I can see everybody who's working. They're the Teamsters.
Yeah, and
what's the Starbucks doing there?
It mirrors the porn industry too. It's the same way. A girl that used to live locally around me, she's since moved away and is married with children, but she did a few adult films. And when me and my friends found out, of course, we had questions, and we found out the reality of the thing. And she says it's much like the regular film business, and she said basically she didn't like it. She thought it was her word was cold. It was very cold. And because she had done some modeling and stuff, and and she had a partial, I guess, almost a shot at being a playmate. Didn't make the cut. And so she's like, and she's like, I'm one of 600 who didn't make it, so.
Wow.
But she said that was a beautiful experience. It was great. And she said she had a blast. They make you feel so comfortable. And then she needed some money, had a friend and said, hey, why don't you do this? And she said it was just cold. It was very, very business. It's all fake. It's all fantasy.
Right.
And she says, I feel like that was like what real acting is like. She goes, because you literally have to act. I'm like, what do you mean? You got no script? And she's like, that you have to act, though. You have to act. She goes, I'm with people I don't know, and I have to act like I'm really into them. I was like, well, she's like, you wouldn't get it until you're there. So, but I think I do understand. Yeah, it's Hollywood's almost the same way. It'll eat you up.
So the thing I want to add to what you guys just said, especially Don with your that's the illusion kind of speech. Even though I know that movies I watch are fake, I am invested, right? I'm 100% into what's happening. And as a lifelong wrestling fan, which I've talked extensively to Michael David Wilson about, had to throw that in there. Story is everything, right? Like, I know matches are predetermined, and I know some moves opponents have to help each other pull off or whatever else. And none of that bothers me. I'm fine with that. And on a side note, I hate the whole, wrestling's fake, right? Well, every fucking thing you watch is fake too, right? Like, these 6 people didn't live in New York and have these nice apartments and not have jobs and hang out at Central Perk all day. But my point is, like, I'm okay with that. Like, I accept that, and I still get wrapped up in the story, and I still want to fight about I love to watch or whatever else. And what this film does, I've literally sat here for the last 2 hours or however long we've done this, and I've adamantly told you that none of this is happening. And yet I really fucking care about Jake's reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And I care that Sam is fucking his wife. And so even though I'm telling you none of this happened, I'm invested in this fucking story, and it's still real to me, damn it.
They made it real for you. And I think that scene where he's in the grave and he has to draw from that power, and he flashes back to the original film set. And it's like a cross between, the outfit that he's wearing, and he's into makeup and things like that. And it's like in his mind, he's still there. And that's where he gets the energy, and it's, I don't know, man. It's like, it's so layered. It's unbelievable. It's a film within a film within a film. There's no denying it. Damn it. That's what it is. And you're right. I was invested the whole time. I gave a shit about Jake Scully.
It's crazy. All right. I don't have anything left in my notes. Bob, do you?
No. Greg Henry's a great character actor. I will say that, though.
Oh, yeah. I know, Don, you already said that you don't, so I will let you jump into what are some other films we should watch if we enjoyed Body Double?
Well, I would say you've mentioned the 2 of the ones that I was going to mention, which were Vertigo and Rear Window. But something, I mean, I guess if we're talking about a film within a film within a film, we could also mention Inception, because it's a dream within a dream within a dream, or however it goes. Mm-hmm. And then the 1990s Sega CD game, Night Traps, where now I never got to fully play it because of the restriction on the game, and I had friends who had it, but I never went over their houses to play it. But from what I understand about the game is you've got girls undressing and it's at a sorority house or something anyway. But there are zombies or monsters that are supposed to be attacking, and it's all about these distractions. So you're supposed to achieve pass all these tasks or whatever because you have cameras everywhere. You're supposed to complete all these tasks, but you might have a girl, getting naked in one room, and that's to distract you from doing, setting up a barrier to keep the zombies from getting in the house. So if you're one of these kids like, oh man, I want to see some boobs, you failed because you get distracted, and it's almost as if the game is built kind of like what Sam's Trap for Jake is. I'm getting you here to be the witness and to watch while something else takes place that accomplishes my goal, which is getting rid of this wife and then making sure that you see it happen. Because when the people die because of the mistakes that you make, you have to watch this. So that would be one of my recommendations. I think the only way you can get it now is like on an emulator or something. But I need to crack that one open and finally play it after, I don't know, we're talking about 28 years since it came out.
I've never even heard of the game.
Yeah, it was pretty controversial when it came out because of the nudity and the violence and stuff like that. It was around the same time that parents were, up in arms about Mortal Kombat and stuff like that. But I think the young lady who was on Different Strokes, Dana Plato, oh gosh, I forgot her name on the show, but she was the sister on Different Strokes. She was in it, and that was another one of the things that had come out was, oh, there's a former child star that's in this game, and it's got naked sorority girls, and it was just one of those things where a lot of people were hyping it up because of the sex and violence. But I would definitely say this would be a good parallel to the movie by having kind of that same emphasis on reality, fantasy, and boobs.
Bob, do you have any recommendations of things people should watch if they liked this film?
Well, I mean, if you stick with Brian De Palma, I would definitely check out Blowout.
Yes.
Though that deals with more of sound than the visual, but it's still, there's the concept of voyeurism is certainly not new. I mean, it's we got just like, what is it? The Tenant, Roland Polanski, who that's another that's a whole other avenue, of problematic that we probably shouldn't even get into. But there's I guess the meta concept of it is probably what, because that's basically what it is. It's like, it's very meta. It's you kind of it's sentient. It knows itself. There's very few films that kind of that fall into that, other than like Inception. It's a dream within a dream within a dream, and you don't know whose dream you're in. This is almost, Body Doubles is almost the same way. You really don't know whose story you're in, which version of the story you're in, which makes it so cool. But yeah, I would definitely, check out Blowout. Even Dress to Kill, which deals, there's, I guess, a voyeuristic. There's some stalking involved in that, which is really kind of skeezy. But those films were, I guess, provocative when they came out. They they were meant to be controversial. I don't know. It's like I don't know of too many films that actually have, I guess the voyeuristic aspect of it. To me, I'm more interested in if you're watching someone and someone else is watching you, and or you see someone else. To me, I'm more fascinated with that, Because then then you get to, you basically, and this is what body double's about. You see something you're not supposed to see.
The only other film I would, the only other film that I thought about as Bob was going through his is it's a German film. It's called The Conversation, and it's an East German like member of the Stasi who's just has these mics or these bugs in people's apartments, and he's just sitting there listening. And the real horror is that he's basically realizing like he has no existence, no life. As far as like he doesn't have the happiness that all these other people have. Like they're people in relationships and with kids and things like that. So he's having to face the reality of like he has nothing. Mm-hmm. But I'd highly recommend that. It's the Conversation. Should be available just about anywhere to get. But
I've never seen that movie. I was thinking of The Conversation with Gene Hackman. And maybe that's not the name of it.
If they adapted it or not.
But the movie I just thought of, though, which if you want to see the other side of voyeurism, is called Vacancy, where you realize that you are being watched, which is pretty cool concept. Especially if you're trying to build suspense, because it's like, who's watching me? Why are they watching me? And of course you find out. You don't want to find out, but you do. So I think that's one that definitely, that's a more recent one that comes to mind. It's got what's his name? Whaley. He was he played Robbie Krieger in The Doors. Can't think of his first name. He's a pretty good actor though.
All right, my two, Dead Ringers. It's two guys who are twins who are interested in the same woman. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to talk too much more about that because I think that people should just see Dead Ringers. And then my other one is kind of more along the lines of people are watching you and everything's fucking crazy. And I think it kind of ties into your book. 1BR. 1BR is... Oh,
God, I can't believe I did.
1BR is one of my favorite films I saw this year. And if you haven't seen it, I don't want to ruin anything with it. That says a lot for coming from me because I normally don't give a shit and just ruin shit for you guys. Go see it and then check out our episode on it because we had the writer, David Marmer, who's also the director, and we had the producer, Alok Mishra, and that's a really fun episode of ours. So see that and then check out that episode.
All right, I got a minor correction. The Conversation with Gene Hackman from 1974, yes. And then the German movie, is called The Lives of Others. I get them mixed up because it's basically the same plot. It's listening in with to what other people are doing. So both good films that have to deal with voyeurism.
It seems
what
like
was the
German
name
one.
of the? What was the name you kind of cut out?
I'm sorry. It was The Conversation with Gene Hackman, and then it's a 2006 film from Germany. It's called The Lives of Others. It's supposed to take place like during East Germany and during the Cold War.
Nice.
I'm trying to. I guess the one from Germany. It sounds like it's more of a man who realizes that he's got nothing because he's living vicariously.
Yes.
And that's, I don't know, that would, I'm very interested in seeing that because I don't know, that's, I've known people who have, I guess, suffered from that, living vicariously, and just to see that kind of loneliness in people is just, it's heartbreaking. So I'd really be interested in seeing that film.
Nice. All right. So I suppose that about wraps it up. So Bob, you want to tell people where they can find you online and check out your podcast and pick up this book?
Yes. For the podcast, you can find us at thisishorror.co.uk. We put out basically at least one episode a week. And I think this week's episode is part 2 with Adam Caesar.
There's a guy with another great book.
Oh, yeah. He's got several great books. So interesting conversation with him. And, of course, you can find me. I am at Bob Pastorella at Twitter.
All right. So that wraps it up for this week. As always, I am James Sabata.
And I am Don Guillory.
And we will see you next week here at thenecronoma.com.